Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This is another Roma Press live stream. We are back as Anthony, who is with us, says the ahead of the biggest freaking game of the season, as Roma obviously face Bayer Leverkusen in the first leg of this year's Europa League semifinals. This is once again a rematch from last year's semifinals, which went obviously in Roma's favor. But obviously, both teams have changed drastically. We will talk about this matchup. We will talk about the kind of team we're facing. We will talk about Roma's moment, as Roma obviously are coming off of a 2-2 draw with Napoli, which we have discussed with John right after the game in the last episode of the Roma Press podcast, which you can also find here in video format. So I just wanted to welcome everybody and thank you for being here with me today. I thought today, given that most places, I guess, it's a it's a public holiday, so most people would have some time to spare to chat about Roma, get depressed together, or rather, not really even get depressed, because what's there to get depressed about? Perhaps some people took issue with how the team has been doing, the ups and downs that are inevitable with fatigue. But yes, as our good friend Chipta says, don't forget to click like. That's the good reminder, Chipta. Thank you so much. If you're just joining us for the first time, this is the Roma Press channel. This is where you can find all the Roma Press podcast episodes in video format, where John and I discussed all things with Roma, and also where I organize these live streams. It would help a lot if you could click on the like button as you watch this video, so that we can get more people involved. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. It really means a lot. I'm going to be, obviously, as always, reading the comments in the chat. So let's keep it civilized. Let's have fun. And I will be happy to answer any question and bring up any talking point that you guys think is worth mentioning in this live stream as we prepare for tomorrow's match day. So we are here, obviously, with Bayer Leverkusen right around the door, and I think it's very strange to face once again. It seems like Roma have had these encounters over the last few years in Europe, where it sort of feels like it's destiny, because we've had that with Bodo, obviously. We've had that with Feyenoord, and we are about to have the same game on the same stage of the Europa League with Bayer Leverkusen, who are obviously cruising. They're flying. They are unbeaten. They have won the Bundesliga for the first time. They have been magnificent. And the big question, obviously, is, can Roma match Bayer's quality? And the opinions are split, but I think most of the opinions from people that are involved in the world of football are leaning towards Bayer being the favorites, because Roma, as good as they have been with Daniele De Rossi, obviously averaging around 2 points per game in Serie A, they're just not there, right? We're talking about Bayer having a historical season, the kind of season that even Napoli from last year didn't have, right? So this Bayer team with Xabi Alonso is impressive, to say the least. Roma, on the other hand, as impressive as they have been, we have started to see signs of fatigue setting in. We've had injuries. We've had Romelu Lukaku and Chris Smalling both hit with injuries. Although both are expected to be called up tomorrow, the latest report is that they both regularly trained with the group, and so they will get called up for the match tomorrow. Lukaku could even start, because as we say, I think this is an interesting development that we can talk about. And here we can answer right there the question by Nimrod. Hey, any injuries for any injured players for tomorrow's match? No, the both teams, because Bayer Leverkusen as well, they seem to have recovered everybody. They had one of their best defenders, Jonathan Ta, questionable. He's back with the team, so he will be available. Roma, same thing. Lukaku, Chris Smalling were questionable. Lukaku obviously missed the last 3 games, putting Roma in a difficult spot because they had to turn their attention to someone like Tammy Abraham, who hadn't started a game in over 10 months. And then obviously Sardar Azmoun, who he has games where he can be useful, and then there's games where he's less brilliant and he struggles. And as Daniele De Rossi accurately called him, he's a midfielder with the number 9, and so he doesn't offer the same things that someone like Romelu Lukaku offers. And I think we've realized how important Lukaku is for this team, despite much criticism, despite perhaps a difficult start to life under Daniele De Rossi. But Lukaku obviously has shown that not many players, and especially at Roma, can do what he does up front, can lead the line the way he does, can cause the same kind of problems that he does to defenders. Because Tammy Abraham, as we've seen against even Udinese, he cannot bully the defense the way Lukaku does. He does not do the same kind of job that Lukaku does, that allows the team to advance further up the pitch. And so if we can get Lukaku back for this game, this will be a huge positive for Roma. We need all the tools and the weapons that we can get for this matchup. Evan Dika, pleasant surprise to have him back for the Napoli match. He was questionable up until a few days ago. There was a lot of questions regarding his availability, when he could be back after that whole collapse against Udinese. There were even reports stating that he could be out for a month. Corriere dello Sport, I remember, published something along those lines, that he could be out for a month. Instead, thankfully, after 2 weeks, Evan Dika was back with the team. So a huge sigh of relief. And I think he was perhaps one of the brighter spots with the team against Napoli. I think that comes down to Miles Viar, Tammy Abraham for his goal contribution, the first goal that he scored in almost 12 months, because at 364 days it was. That was pretty incredible. 364 days since Tammy Abraham had scored his last goal for Roma. And Evan Dika was impressive. Perhaps the first big slip up for Gianluca Mancini this season. He's had a wonderful season. I think he's been up there as one of the best defenders in Italy. Sometimes it happens. He got the match against Napoli wrong, although he had a pretty good save. Okay, where whose antlers are those? Did you get that buck? No, this is I'm at a country house with a friend of mine, and this is a decoration that I have. I don't know much about, but I don't think that anybody that I know of is responsible for getting that buck. I think this is more of like kind of like a flea market thing. So. um how nervous do you think extra time will be? Well, obviously, Bayer have had quite the reputation this season for doing what they've been doing to keep that unbeaten streak. And it's always fascinating to me. It works both ways, because Roma have also had these moments where they would go on an unbelievable run, and then teams would try and take a crack at it, and most of the time they would succeed at breaking that spell. It always has to be a great motivation for a team to face an opponent like Bayer, who prides itself on doing what they did this past weekend against Stuttgart, or previously against Borussia Dortmund, where you basically think, oh well, they've given up, right? They just let it go, and instead they reassert themselves as the team in charge. Even if they draw against Stuttgart, they come off as the real winners because they keep that spirit alive, the spirit of a team that is impossible to beat. Now that's a huge thing for Roma to consider, to aim for, because what better way to get to a Europa League final than to beat the team that has been linked with this infamous word, unbeaten, unbeaten, unbeaten. I mean, that's the perfect way to get to Europa League final. um Ciao, Andy. Looks like you're in Montana. No, I'm sorry, Michael. I was in Montana a little over a year ago, in Whitefish. Yeah, at the start of April 2023. So what are the odds? But no, this time around I'm near Hamburg in Germany. Um, should we aim for a win tomorrow at all costs, or would a draw still be okay considering we still play away next week? Uh, you know, I think we have to keep our expectations in check, guys. It's wonderful to dream. It's obviously factual that Roma have turned it up in Europe. They've been unbelievable in Europe. Roma have always shown up. This year, no exception. With Daniele De Rossi's taking over, we've really got it going. As soon as the level got a bit higher, as soon as we didn't have to face the likes of Slavia Praga or whatever, we turned it up, and so sure, that's factual. But we also have to consider where Roma stand in the league, what's at stake in Serie A, what's their energy level, what's their strength, and the kind of opponent that we're facing. Now, I think any result that is not a loss against Bayer Leverkusen tomorrow will still count as something positive. Obviously, if you have home advantage, given what we've shown in Europe at home, think of Brighton, for example, where you get going and you have that match right in your pocket from the first minute. Now that's beautiful. That's a beautiful sight. It's something that allows you to then think about the return like with so much more optimism. But Bayer Leverkusen are not Brighton. Bayer Leverkusen are out for blood. They feel that you've basically, almost like cheated your way through to a Europa League final last year, right? That infamous game of Roma holding down the fort and Bayer having like 28 shots in that match. Roma having what 20% possession, something ridiculous like that, and that didn't go down well with Xabi Alonso. Xabi Alonso, if you guys don't remember, but Xabi Alonso was pissed off after that match. He didn't say anything, you know. He didn't say anything that could cause some uproar because probably of his rapport with Jose Mourinho, but the guy was pissed. And they definitely felt like they deserved to go through. That didn't happen. This time around, we're talking about an opponent that scores a huge amount of goals, an opponent that has already won in the league for the first time in history, and is flying on an emotional high. An opponent that has players like Florian Wirtz, who's absolutely uh, outstanding this season. Breaking all kinds of records. I think there were already signs of a really special player in there last year. But this year he took it to a whole other level, and Xabi Alonso has done that for a lot of players at Bayer Leverkusen. As I mentioned before, Jonathan Tah is a huge defender, and did immense progress under Alonso. And so it would be nice to go tomorrow to the Stadio Olimpico, see a team that is able to handle the pressure and whatever Bayer are about to give them, and also control the game and dominate, because both teams, again, we're facing a different situation. Like Bayer Leverkusen director Simon Rolfs just said, uh, this is not the same Roma, this is not the same Bayer Leverkusen. Both teams will keep it very competitive. but Roma want to play just as offensively as Bayern do. So this is not the Roma team that hides and tries to secure a result early on and then lock itself up. No, this is a Roma team that does try to build something, that does try to take risks and see if it pays off. That's a philosophy. That's a philosophy. That's a way of uh, of playing. That's something that Daniele De Rossi also touched upon today in his press conference. He noted Bayer Leverkusen are not the only team that are able to come back from a deficit. Bayer Leverkusen are not the only team that scores in added time. We did it too. We also went there. We also scored against Udinese at the death. We also scored against Fiorentina at the death. Um, Roma have had similar episodes to Bayer Leverkusen. Obviously, that it didn't pan out the way it did for them in the league, but Roma are just are very much involved from the first until the last minute. If that's something that we can say about Daniele De Rossi's Roma, is that this is a team that has been known to be involved from the first until the last minute. Um, let's see. We should always play to win. Bayern have not been that good in the Europa League this year. Remember, Karabakh almost took them out. Bayer Leverkusen. One thing is they've been conceding a lot of goals. They've been conceding a lot of goals, and that's why it's so important to have somebody like Lukaku who who can bully, who doesn't need 30 chances to score, because this is the kind of game where you need somebody like him to draw the opponent out and to then be able to have Paulo Dybala go in, cut through the defense, and score, or Lorenzo Pellegrini. But because that's the kind of job that we've seen. Tammy Abraham, perhaps he still has it in him, but not right now. Tammy Abraham doesn't have the physicality. He scored against Napoli, God bless him, but this is still not the player that Roma need right now. And we can also talk about that this live stream. There have been a lot of rumors about of Romelu Lukaku, the future of Tammy Abraham. I would be interested to know what you guys think, because there has been talk about Romelu Lukaku potentially staying at Roma potentially evaluating Tammy Abraham, his future, the options that the summer window may hold for him. And then also, obviously, with Daniele De Rossi staying as Roma's head coach in the long term, there are also considerations to be made regarding the way he wants to play and the kind of players that he needs and what that means for the attack, because Roma seemed to want to prioritize the attack for next season. So that's going to be an interesting thing to keep track of. But for tomorrow, it's even more crucial to have somebody like Lukaku at full speed, El Shaarawy at full speed. Obviously, we will see a Rick Karsdorp back in the lineup. Rick Karsdorp back in the lineup for two reasons. One is Zeki Salik is suspended, and Rasmus Christensen is not part of Roma's UEFA list. So Rick Karsdorp is the only right back that Roma have at their disposal. Earlier today, Daniele De Rossi was actually asked whether Diego Llorente could play as right back, and De Rossi, to my surprise, said that's one of the options we're evaluating. Now, that can be a bluff, or that can also be an option for when Roma try to have more defenders on for, say, the second half. I think definitely that's also very interesting, because we are faced with obviously Zeki Salik, who was impressive against Milan, but we've seen that one of the main features of our wings is that they're all very inconsistent, perhaps with the exception of Stefan El Shaarawy, who seems to have found his groove. Everybody else has been pretty inconsistent. Even Angelino, who started off hot, had a really good performance in the derby. He's been shaky. What can we say about Rick Karsdorp that hasn't been said? This man is going on to I mean, this is his seventh year at Roma, and he still has a contract, and he still has an important role clearly for this team. He was not called up for the match against Napoli because Daniele De Rossi didn't want to risk him ahead of the match against Bayer Leverkusen. So the idea is for Rick Karsdorp to start tomorrow in place of Zeki Salik. Yeah, so we Bumblebee. What, Andy? What is your take on XG? Let's get it on record. My take is it's a headache. It's a headache. I don't know. It's a funny thing. It's become more prominent as a way of analyzing football. I don't really know how I feel about it. It's definitely funny at times to look at it and make considerations based off of that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe shit. Quoting the great Gennaro Gattuso. Super nervous facing Leverkusen. Can we handle them? Well, you have to tell me because the opinion is split. We had Rudy Voller, so the guy who clearly has a past in both teams, and he says that obviously no, Bayer Leverkusen got the edge. Roma don't have shit. Roma don't have the quality nor the energy to face a team such as Bayer Leverkusen at this stage of the season. That seems to be the prominent view of a lot of people that have been involved with both teams. They already won the league and can go all in for Europa League. Absolutely, that's what Daniele De Rossi also mentioned in an interview with Sky Sport. He said it would be wonderful if we had 70 points in the league. Champions League qualification would then be secured, and we could just drop our heads and focus on winning the Europa League, which is an ambition for De Rossi, for the club, for Paredes. Paredes also in an interview today, he said, Dybala and I, we want to win the Europa League. That's one of our objectives for the season. So clearly there are things that we will have to do despite playing every 2-3 days, because I mean, listen, you played against Udinese on Thursday. You got back to Rome that same evening later on. On Saturday evening, you were already out and on your way over to Naples. Sunday, you didn't train, you played, and off you go back to Rome to prepare for the Europa League. So this team has been playing basically every 48 hours at some point. So it gets to you. It gets to you, and yet there is that ambition. There is that ambition to win. Good and bad. Good and bad, because Roma should not lose focus on Serie A. We still hold a tiny advantage over Atalanta. We are facing Juventus in just a few days. Then we will be facing Atalanta. So it all builds, guys. It all builds towards a finale to remember, because this is going to be. I want everybody to recall the match, the last match of Francesco Totti. I know I mentioned it ad nauseum on the podcast, but I feel like the end to this season will be like that game. It will be an up and down of emotions all the way in both competitions. That's the big payoff. There is a great risk involved, but I think we should also focus on the positive. We are Roma fans. We got enough misery in our lives. The rumors about Chiesa seem weird, with Dybala and Baldanzi already Baldi already on the roster. Is he an option only if Dybala goes, or are those rumors fugazi? No, those rumors are not fugazi, because my man Filippo Biafora of Il Tempo confirmed it. Confirmed it, as in Roma are one of the teams to have shown interest in Federico Chiesa. This is a player that they've liked for a long time, and Federico Chiesa is going to try and leave Juventus this summer. So that it's not fugazi. I think the Federico Chiesa's presence does not clash with Dybala or Baldanzi. I think Federico Chiesa potentially coming in the summer, which would be a huge signing for Roma. All things considered, doesn't matter if he had ACL trouble. Still, that kind of player, he can be regenerated, rejuvenated under a different coach, under a coach that is not named Massimiliano Allegri. I think Federico Chiesa has still a lot to give to this game. For me, Federico Chiesa's potential arrival in the summer hints clearly at Roma wanting to fully commit to Daniele De Rossi's idea of playing football. I don't think De Rossi wants to keep playing the way Roma are set up to play. This team, again, if you listen to Daniele De Rossi, he's been very positive, very optimistic when talking about this team. You know, he's been praising the players. He's been very encouraging, very motivating. But even after the match against Napoli, he said a thing that stood out to me, and I think it's very true. He said, in the positions that matter, we don't have enough technical players. So an absence like the one of Leandro Paredes makes a difference. Now, that is something I think that De Rossi thinks is true for a number of positions. And I think if it was up to him, our attack would be built completely differently. I do not think, for example, that somebody like Romelu Lukaku is a long-term option for Daniele De Rossi. I do think that Daniele De Rossi wants to play much more fluidly. He wants to have those. He wants pace. He wants pace and technicality. Federico Chiesa gives you Paolo Dybala gives you exactly that. Baldanzi gives you exactly that. That doesn't mean that that's close to what Roma want to try and do with De Rossi in charge. That's his idea of playing football. Somebody like Chiesa, I think, is very close to what De Rossi would like the team to do. So keep an eye on Federico Chiesa because there is definitely something in there. He's not going to renew his contract with Juventus. I do not think he's going to stay, regardless if Allegri stays or goes, and I think he goes. Doesn't matter if Thiago Motta comes in. I think Chiesa will leave Juventus, and Roma are definitely an option for him. Anthony, our good friend, do you believe that Daniele De Rossi is prioritizing Serie A over Europa League or operating on a game by game basis? Definitely the latter. He was asked about that today as well. Um, you know, it would be too easy. He had the opportunity today to say that he would like to win, the Europa League rather than focusing on Serie A. But no, he even brought up his own record, his own points record in Serie A, so 2 points per game. He was very proud of it. He said we're trying to do everything at the same time, and we're just tackling it game by game. And I think he does feel penalized by how Serie A have responded to Roma's requests to postpone certain games, because he feels like that is the overwhelming factor. That is what could play a role ultimately in whether Roma succeed or not in their objectives with him in charge. But what can you do? Serie A. we have a whole discussion about whether Federico Chiesa is left-footed or right-footed. He's right-footed. He's Federico Chiesa. I mean, he's been asked to play so many positions at Juventus. We tend to forget what this guy can do. Obviously, Federico Chiesa has suffered an ACL, so clearly a perfect fit for Roma. But no, in all seriousness, I think this is definitely a player that, if you were to bring in someone like him, that is still a statement. It is still a statement. I don't care if you consider him a big signing or not. That is an important signing, an important sign also for Roma under De Rossi. I hope we can win Europa League. Does Roma have the budget to get Chiesa? Why Roma can't have a decent right back since Cafu? Yeah, that's the fullback question is one for the ages, because it doesn't matter who the sporting director is. I think the last time, with the exception of Leonardo Spinazzola in that crazy, what was it, 6-month spell prior to his Achilles rupture, The last time we had a really good fullback that made you go, wow, was Lucas Digne. Lucas Digne leaves. He left in 2016. that's that's been 8 years, and we've had so many crappy players. It's pretty outstanding. The talent is definitely there somewhere in Europe. It's just Roma have had trouble getting their hands onto them. Do Roma have money for Federico Chiesa? I think the latest reports are that Juventus would be happy to even consider selling Chiesa for around 13 to 15 million. That would be all plus Valenza for them. So that's important. That's what Juventus, like Roma, are looking after due to financial fair play. They need the money, they need the revenue. So if those are the figures, Roma would definitely be able to afford that. Salary wise, it depends on whether the player wants to make the effort, whether the player wants to extend helping hand and lower his demands, which I think he would. Now, because someone like Federico Chiesa wants to continue playing in Italy. Can Roma survive these 4 crazy matches and stay in at least top 5 in Serie A table? Guys, I would love to have questions. I would love to be able to answer those questions. Unfortunately, I'm not an oracle. I would love to have the certainty that Roma can handle this kind of rhythm, this kind of tempo. I thought after Udinese, we would see a Roma that was much livelier than the one we saw against Napoli. We didn't get that. We saw a Roma that was sort of all over the place, getting overwhelmed by a Napoli team that was eager to do better in front of their home crowd. Roma just, it seemed like they couldn't keep up. It seemed like they were a bit out of tune, out of sync. And as I said, Miles VR man of the match. Well, that tells you all you need to know, unfortunately. But the flip side is going into this game against Bayer Leverkusen, if you have somebody you can count on, that's Miles VR. I mean, how good does it feel? And we've mentioned this with John, but how good does it feel? Because perhaps we're taking it far too for granted that it feels amazing to be able to count on your goalkeeper to make life easier for you. It's amazing to be able to look in goal and see that Miles VR has complete control over the situation there. You don't have to worry about him. He's got it. Whatever happens, he's got your back. That's a feeling that we haven't had in forever. Somebody, even in an interview, I think it was Dazen, they asked him about Alisson. So even in the media landscape, he's being linked with that famous name, Alisson. Alisson, arguably the best goalkeeper that we've ever seen at Roma, and probably the last really good goalkeeper. Rui Patricio in his first year was very good, but then we obviously know how it how it went. Miles VR, obviously, there's so much still to be said about him because we have only seen him play for over 3 months. But he's been remarkable. The how he's interpreted these games that Roma have been in, how he's been able to keep his cool, and he's been so crucial for Roma keeping up in the table, staying up in those positions, in those top positions. Because without him, I think Milas VR has given you what, a total of 6 points. I think that's one of the reports that I read yesterday. I think mentioned that it was 6 points in the league. That's what Milas VR gave you so far. 6 points in a little over 3 months. That's huge. And that's what Roma needed all along. We don't need a savior. We don't need a legend. We just need a guy doing his goddamn job. Michael, right back is the weakest position in football globally. There are very few great right backs compared to other positions. It's difficult. It's difficult, and also because those are positions that are marked with inconsistency. It's because it's as you say, it's a very difficult position also to master. And so many coaches have so many different demands. You can be a great right back at a club and then go to another club, and the demands in that club for that particular position. I mean, Go ask any attacker at Juve. They've basically been turned into right backs under Allegri. How are they going to develop elsewhere? Kolarov, but I was mentioning. Well, yeah, Kolarov, true, but I meant since Lucas Digne. So we had Lucas Digne, Kolarov, Spinazzola, a burst of Spinazzola on left back, and then right back. That's a whole different story. Um, Right side, yeah. Right side, Cassetti, Balzaretti, Sisigno, Karsdorp, Mike Consley. Yeah, the quality is quite low, don't you think? It's inconsistent. Also, I love Maicon and I love Kolarov too. There's so many. The Kolarov is a great player. I mean, when was the last time we saw a fullback score as many goals as Kolarov did? But man, his drop off in quality is very close to the one that we saw with Maicon. I mean, a guy whose age just caught up with him overnight, and it was brutal, brutal. Obviously, the great Brunetto Perez. Obviously, this a name for the history books. Mazin, hi Andy. I hope all good, man. Thank you, Mazin, so much. One of our good patrons, longtime friends of the show. I think Roma and Atalanta should have requested the rescheduling for the match after the return leg in Europa League. Only Roma asking makes it hard for the league to approve. Uh, I think what we're seeing in Serie A, we're seeing a very divided Serie A. It's a cutthroat business. I mean, people here in Lega Serie, there are no friends. This year specifically, I thought, certain clubs had a reputation to be friendlier with certain other clubs. This year, everybody's at each other's throats. Lazio, Napoli, big enemies. Atalanta, big enemies with the likes of Juve. We got Torino, who basically hate everybody, and then we have the smaller sides that are still fighting against relegation, and they try to get on friendly terms with the more powerful teams. At the end of the day, Roma are one of the few teams that have voted for to have Serie A reduced to 18 teams. Roma and three other clubs. I believe three other clubs that are among the top six. I don't want to say the names because I don't remember exactly, but it was basically Roma, Juve, and somebody else voted to have 18 teams in Serie A. I think that decision, which was scrapped, everybody else voted against it, backfired, and Roma are seeing the effects of a politically motivated decision and attitude from the Lega Serie A. Giovanni, hey lads, love the podcast and always tune in. Forza Roma, we're gonna show Leverkusen how to lose again. I appreciate the optimism, Giovanni. That's very much needed. I think we all want to believe that, think about where we again. I just, sometimes I feel like I'm repeating myself, but I think it's also important ahead of these very special nights, because these are very special nights. Some of us may take them for granted, but some others remember the fear, the terror of these European nights, the terror of humiliation. And yet, over time, we've built up some confidence. And then we also have to think about where we were in January. What was our mindset for the rest of the season? I mean, here we are, we're discussing Roma potentially advancing to a Europa League final if they get these two games with Bayer Leverkusen, right? We're talking about a Roma team doing this against an opponent that is unbeaten, that has accomplished a great milestone in its club career and its club history. Sorry, we're talking about a Roma team that is still very much in the run for Champions League race, that is right now ahead of Atalanta. A Roma team that, despite all the adversity, all the problems, all the freaking 29 points in 20 games in the first 20 games of the season, despite all of that, we are here, we're talking about this. That's huge. That's huge. We should not forget, because I remember very distinctly having to do the podcast in that period of time where just nothing was going right. And perhaps that will be the case in the next few weeks as well, guys. We have a very difficult schedule. Roma will be playing against some of the toughest opponents in Italy, in Europe as well. Now with Bayer, and who knows what could happen. But we are here. We can say that we are here. We don't have to be resigned to the fate of a team like Napoli, a Napoli team that was coming off a historical Scudetto, an unbelievable achievement after 33 years, and now they could hope for the best and perhaps qualify for Conference League. I mean, come on, that is misery. Right now, we are kind of living a dream and we don't even know it. So, I guess the big conclusion is appreciate what this team right now is giving to you, especially with somebody like Daniele De Rossi. This was not expected. This was not predicted. I don't think anybody could have predicted this. I love reading some of the interviews that then I have to translate and for the website, where you have all these former players or Fabio Capello or whoever. So did you expect this from De Rossi? Yeah, I expected this. He was always a great coach on the pitch as a player. Blah blah blah. No, with the way Roma were going this season, I do not think even somebody like freaking Antonio Conte could have done anything as impressive as Daniele De Rossi has done so far. Hey, Andy, which position do you think needs to be addressed most urgently in the summer? I think Daniele De Rossi will agree with me when he says we need more technical quality in the midfield, because once you lose Paredes, once you take off Pellegrini, perhaps Pellegrini needs a rest, Pellegrini gets injured, whatever. Who do you have? Eduardo Bove has been awful in doing what Daniele De Rossi has been asking of him. Eduardo Bove has been useless when he's not chasing an opponent around. Cristante, obviously, his technical ability is very limited. Houssem Aouar is nowhere to be found. Renato Sanchez is a disaster. Who else? That's for Daniele De Rossi. Midfield is key. In Daniele De Rossi's mind, the technical players are Paredes, Lorenzo Pellegrini, Paolo Dybala, Stefano El Shaarawy, I'd say, and perhaps Tommaso Baldanzi. That's 5 technical players. You need more. You need to have more players who know what to do with the ball, because this Roma team is no longer the team that waits for the opponent to come their way and then intercept the ball and play basically counter-attacking football. This Roma team wants to dictate the pace, wants to have passing lanes, wants to have passing schemes. For that, you need players who know how to manage the ball. You need to know how to string more than 2 passes together. So far, I think the roster was built exactly against this type of football that Roma are trying to achieve with Daniele De Rossi. And that's the challenge. That's the challenge right here, right now, in this part of the season, where you have to make use of the tools at your disposal. You have to. So Daniele De Rossi, as much as you would like him to criticize somebody like Renato Sanchez after the awful performance that we saw from him against Napoli, he cannot do it. He cannot go publicly and publicly shame Renato Sanchez the way Jose Mourinho publicly shamed Rick Karsdorp last season. He cannot do it because right now, as De Rossi said, we need everybody in whatever capacity. If Renato Sanchez, despite not playing 90 minutes, can still give me a quality 6 minutes, 7 minutes, 8 minutes, maybe 9 minutes near the end, great. But he needs me to give those minutes and to give the team a bit of a push and keep the ball, not make mistakes. So far, those second lines, Eduardo Bove, Renato Sanchez, Houssem Aouar, Tommaso Baldanzi, I think to a lesser extent, because I think the demands on him are different compared to those other guys. Roma have not been able to sustain that same kind of quality. That's one of the first positions that I think Daniele De Rossi will go up to the next sporting director and say, "Listen, I need more quality. I need more quality, as in I need more players that know exactly what the ball feels like at the tip of your foot, and not have players come in, players who can tackle or intercept the ball. That's secondary right now with De Rossi. The important thing is to have somebody that has a clear idea of what to do with the ball. It doesn't seem that Daniele De Rossi is convinced by Awar. I think the Awar is in a difficult spot. And I think, again, increasingly, this part of the season is so difficult for any player that has fallen out of rhythm or that has never found rhythm throughout the rest of the season. I mean, look at Chris Smalling. Even Chris Smalling has trouble getting back to his feet. This moment in time is the worst time ever to try things out, to have players come in and see if they can figure things out. It doesn't happen. At this time of the season, the pressure is on. The opponent plays much harder. The stakes are way higher. And there's very, very, very little room for errors. And so somebody like Renato Sanchez would need a match where he can play 20 minutes to get his head straight. But you can't give it that to him because the quality drop off is so significant with him on the pitch that Roma lose momentum and they can lose a game because of that. So it's going to happen. It's Roma will have to face Bayer Leverkusen with their strongest starting 11. I do not expect a match that will be eventually resolved by somebody coming off the bench. Perhaps what? Tammy Abraham. That's the most you can expect. I think De Rossi will try and have his guys play the hardest. Obviously, the next match you're facing Juventus in Serie A, and Juventus are going through a terrible spell. I mean, they're having a disastrous second half of the season, but they're still playing once per week, and we know that makes a world of difference. We saw that against Bologna, obviously a different team compared to Juventus, but that will be for another time, guys. So I think that we got it this time. I wanted to thank everybody who tuned in today. If you would like to support Roma Press, if you like what we do for the website, for this channel, for the social media, please consider subscribing to our Patreon and going to patreon.com/Roma Press. It would really help. You can find all the links down below. That helps a lot, and you can get a lot of cool benefits. Subscribe to our channel yet, do so right now. We will be back with John tomorrow right after the match. If you are a patron, you will get access to a special post-match reaction episode from John. If not, you will see us right here on this channel in video format on Friday after Roma play Bayer Leverkusen at the Stadio Olimpico. So thank you again for joining me for today's live stream. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Let's hope that Roma can figure this thing out and at least bring home or keep at home a good result going into the second leg in Germany next week. So thank you again, guys. Take care of yourselves and see you soon. As always, Forza Roma.